Dulce A Decorum A by Wilfred Owen. Bent double like old beggars under sacks, knock-kneed, coughing like hags, we cursed through sludge, till on the haunting flares we turned our backs, and towards our distant rest began to trudge. Men marched asleep, many had lost their boots, but limped on, bloodshot. All went lame, all blind, drunk with fatigue, deaf even to the hoots of gas shells dropping softly behind. Gas! Gas! Quick, boys! An ecstasy of fumbling, fitting the clumsy helmets just in time. But someone still was yelling out, and stumbling, and floundering like a man in fire or lime. Dim through the misty panes and thick green light, as under a green sea, I saw him drowning. In all my years before my helpless sight, he plunges at me, guttering, choking, drowning. If in some smothering dreams you too could pace behind the wagon that we flung him in, and watch the white eyes withering in his face, his hanging face, like a devil's sick of sin. If you could hear at every jolt the blood come gargling from the froth-corrupted lungs, obscene as cancer, bitter as the cud of vile, incurable sores on innocent tongues, my friend, you would not tell with such high zest to children ardent for some desperate glory the old lie. Dulce et decorum et pro patria mori. Dulce et decorum et pro patria mori, a line taken from the Latin odes of Roman poet Horace, means it is sweet and proper to die for one's country. Wilfred Owen's poem Dulce et decorum A acts as a representation of the hardships he had endured as he fought in northern France during World War I. In this poem, he takes a different stance on the war topic in contrast to the name of the poem. His work acts as a protest against the deemed heroic aspect of war and highlights the mental instability war presents. This poem analysis will review the war and pity of war of Wilfred Owen as he retells various crises that he experienced during the war, demonstrating the themes of warfare, suffering, and patriotism. Written in August 1917 at Craig-Lockhart War Hospital during recovery, Owen recalls the circumstances he found himself in as a young soldier fighting in the war. He finds a way to reopen his healing wounds in order to share his belief on the service of war. The poem begins as a double sonnet right at the center of the war, where Owen portrays the atmosphere of trench warfare with disgust and pity, creating a gloomy and hopeless tone. Using imagery to convey his message and alter the pace of the poem, Owen divides his poem into three actions. In the first stanza, he describes the movement of the soldiers through mud and danger in no man's land. They are tired, mainly because of the walk, and describes them as, quote, lame, blind, drunk, lost, and asleep, using these words to show the effect the war has on even the strongest of men. The second stanza increases the action, starting with gas, gas, quick, boys. The soldiers are in total confusion. In the final stanza, Owen describes what the attack did to the soldiers, ending the poem stating that, quote, the old lie, that the war's something that should be praised, should be forgotten. This reminds me of the novel by Timothy Findley, The Wars, where the main protagonist, Robert Ross, is tired of the brutality of war and wants to find a way out of the hardship. Readers see through the main protagonist, Robert Ross, the mental instability the war brought to its partakers. This is the reality of any war. It only causes destruction of youths and their dreams. Findley uses a scene in the novel as a metaphoric representation of what the war had done to both Robert and the mass number of men who had enrolled. It had robbed them of their body, mind, and spirit and left them alone, scared, and angry. The choice of words to emphasize the point of feeling drowned, deprived, and hopeless is seen in both pieces of literature. A recurrent tone seen in the stories of war are gloom, sadness, and hopelessness. The main character no longer wants to fight and begins to question what they are fighting for and whether it is really worth it after all. Written in first person, Owen includes himself in the number of men that are helpless in this fight, as he wants to make this as personal as possible. One aspect of literary criticism noted in this poem is formalism and new criticism. This is the way literature can be read in respect to its form and content. Author Wilfred Owen uses words of despair, deprivation, such as beggars, hags, haunting, cancer, and cursed, to describe what the war really is. The figurative language presented in the form of similes are intended to alter the perception of the public eye or the readers about the war. Owen is appalled by the fact that going to war is glorified and applauded with enthusiasm and pride by the public, without them knowing what is really at stake and the amount of danger and the negative effect the war has on these soldiers. For example, when he says, quote, like old beggars under sacks, and, quote, like coughing like hags. These words are used as similes that create a gory graphical image in the reader's minds about what went on during the war. He believes that the Western world especially are completely blinded by the fact of people going to war for their country, that they have forgotten the importance of peace over war. Their lack of awareness angers Owen and prompts him to create this poem in the tone that he did. He wants to emphasize that no man should have to endure such pain. Carl Jung coined the term collective unconscious, which refers to the psychological criticism theory and the way our memories from our experiences and information we have are stored. In the short story, The Dragon by Catherine Gouvier, the psychiatrist in the story was not able to suppress his previous experiences as they continued to show up every time he spoke with his patients. In this poem, Owen portrays this unconscious mind in the form of his dreams, where he is not able to get past the fact that the gore that came with the death of his friend was too haunting. The image continues to haunt him in his dreams, resurfacing in his mind at every chance they get. His comparison of soldiers to old hags is intentional, as he wants to reduce this heroic image by referring to the soldiers and golden fighters as heroes, in a sense reducing their worth just as the war had done to them. Using these similes as a way of showing the disrespect brought by this war business, Owen is able to emphasize his point. The detailed descriptions of the suffering uses negative diction to shift the reader's mindset on the glorification of war and show exhaustion, speed, and confusion. In the third stanza, Owen states, quote, behind the wagon that we flung him in. Instead of using the word placed or settled as softer toned words for moving a dead body into the wagon, the author decides to use flung. This acts as a way of showing how the death of soldiers happens frequently. So a human being flung, representing the human life, is no longer needed and the worth is being degraded. It has almost become a way of life for them for casualties to happen so frequently and often. Based on the poem, it is clear that the title contradicts his view of the war. His main goal with the production of his poem is to discourage the glorification and positive attitude to war by criticizing and addressing parents, teachers, and writers who are encouraging their young boys to go to war unprepared for what they are going to face. He sees these young boys being told that war is where they need to be, as it was so glamorized, and how there is novelty in death, proving their courage and bravery. At the end of the poem, author Owen Wilfred is able to convey his innocent message directly to those spreading the lie, showing that death is the main result of war, not glory.